welcome to this conversation tonight with Sally Shaw. This conversation was recorded a number of days ago. So Sonia's going to interview Sally, and following the interview with Sally, we'll have a live Q&A session. If you'd like to ask some questions, please put them into the chat box on YouTube. Just type them in there and we'll pass those questions to Sonia and Sally, and we'll converse as long as you have fascinating questions for them. Now I'm going to now pass you on to Sonia and Sally and the interview.
Hi, my name is Sonia and I'm part of the COSAC committee this year. Today I'm interviewing Sally Shaw about creative ways to care for creation. So Sally, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Well, it's lovely to be here. Yes, I'm originally from the UK. I trained as a nurse midwife. I then worked in the Cambodian refugee camps in the 80s with a medical team. I then worked in Cambodia and did some community development, but later moved into using improvisation theatre work to work with people from very disadvantaged backgrounds. We used it as a way of helping them find themselves, helping them feel more comfortable with their feelings and to have more confidence. And then in 2007, we moved to South Australia. I've done all kinds of courses. I've done a creative writing course, and then I've done a master in education, a master in ministry, and now I'm doing a master as a doctor of ministry, but all on the same journey. And this has been very much a calling from God to really wake up the evangelical church to the need for them to connect, for everybody, all Christians, to connect their faith with care for creation. I feel it's a mandate for everybody, but having a conversation with people is often difficult for various reasons, and so that's why I found that the creative arts can actually be much more effective.
Thank you. You suggest that there are Christians who may be ambivalent about care for creation. Can you explain what that means and what that might look like in practice?
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of research on that, and I'm sure, and I think many others have. It's very historic. It's complicated. It's influenced by, as I say, history, economics, politics, culture, and a lot of goes right back to Plato and his beliefs, dualism, making the body less important than the soul or the spirit, the earth is less important than going up to heaven. And I think these beliefs have become infiltrated into a lot of church teaching, and particularly, in worship. If you listen to many of the worship songs, there's very much a focus on leaving this earth and going up to heaven. Those beliefs, I think, are wrong, again, influenced by Platonic way of thinking, but it's hard for people to understand that when it's so much part of their way of thinking and their Christian beliefs. So I think, this is a problem for a lot of people and hard to address.
And so why do you think that arts-based activities could be more effective than giving a presentation or PowerPoint on the reasons we need to care for creation?
Yeah, again, I think our education system is, certainly since the Enlightenment, is very much putting the head. Rationalism is more important than the body. And I believe that our education system has focused so much on, you could say, the left side of the brain. And as a result, we tend to fill our heads with lots of information rather than listening to the body and our feelings and our senses. And just, I think the early church was very much a holistic way of learning. the indigenous people, it's a very much a holistic way of learning. But unfortunately, our Western tertiary, particularly tertiary education, just seems to focus very much on the head. So I think I've been influenced actually by a neurologist called Ian McGilchrist, a Scottish man, who talks about the right side of the brain actually being more important. It's the side that's, as well as being creative, it's the social side, it relates to people, it's intuitive. And in fact, he says the left side of the brain should be serving the right. But unfortunately, our economic, our education, our political systems tend to dominate or encourage the left side to be more important.
So you have explained the reasons why you think arts-based activities are more effective. Why then do most tertiary education continue to concentrate on using rational type teaching methods? Are you aware of any tertiary institutions that do use more embodied arts-based teaching? How have they been effective?
It's very complicated. It's the way tertiary education functions. There's a lot of online teaching going on these days, not just with COVID, but prior to that, there's a lot of issues with money, how these institutions can keep functioning well. And therefore, it's very easy to just slip into this way of just using the head as the main way of teaching people. But having said that, I've got the book here. If you can see it, anyway, I'm not advertising it, but anyway, it's from the UK. It's called Creativity in the Classroom, and it's for tertiary education, and they have used poetry, drawings, experiential type teaching, many sculpture, many different art activities in their law courses, in their medicine courses, in their economic courses, their technology courses. So every course they have been able to introduce these type of teachings. People often feel initially very uncomfortable. They're not used to this type of teaching, but after a while they've actually found it the reports and the evaluations have found that people have gained an enormous amount from it. And I think also that there's been an influence. There's a Brazilian educationist called Paulo Freire, who was very much wanting to, his focus was on the poor, the marginalized who were not getting the education, and he wanted to release them from their poverty and to help them find ways of being educated. And so he and others have encouraged a much more holistic way of approaching education, as well as introducing adult education methodologies, which is very much looking at the adult who already knows a whole lot of information. And it's important to be able to draw out what we already know, what we've experienced, and to use that type of information along with the new information. And I guess it's a way of empowering people to realize that they already have a lot of ideas, but sometimes these ideas need unpacking, and to just have a rational conversation. Sometimes it doesn't work, it could be threatening, but using the arts can be a way of helping people think through issues in a less threatening way.
And from your experience, what aspects of arts-based teaching do you think have the capacity to challenge those stuck beliefs? How do they bring about transformative discoveries?
I think it's very important, if you're going to introduce this type of teaching, to create an atmosphere of fun, of trust. And so I've used quite a lot of improvisation theatre activities, And people often go, oh my goodness, I couldn't possibly do that. That's far too embarrassing or whatever. But they're not, they're very gentle, particularly the kind of warm-up ones, and it can help bring the group dynamics together. And I think the other important thing is that people can learn from each other. And often, in a classroom or even in discussion, sometimes it's the more vocal extrovert people that will do all the talking. Whereas with this type of activities, you can encourage people, the shyer ones, to join in, to feel important, and to relax. So yeah, I think, I've had people go outside and just study a piece of grass, just look at it, pull it apart and study it, and then perhaps write a haiku poem about it, or just draw a picture of it. And the important thing is to make sure people don't feel they've got to get it perfect and all right. That again, so the atmosphere needs to be fun and relaxed, and then opportunities for people to reflect and to think more deeply about why perhaps that nature doesn't have a strong connection in their life, or perhaps it has in the past but doesn't any longer. Why nature isn't part of their church? What's going on? Why have we made all these splits and kind of, in a sense, pushed God's creation out and kind of sadly made it seem as if it's not important?
That's really interesting. Thank you. You talk about arts-based methods helping people discover ways to take positive action to care for creation. What do you mean by this, and can you give any examples?
I think by introducing people to creation, going outside, and just being aware of God's amazing creation, and as well as how it's all connected. But also, I think it's very important to get people to get their hands dirty. I've done a lot of bushwork, and I love just releasing these beautiful plants that God's created, releasing them from the weeds, the things that strangle them, the whatever it is, and then allowing them to flourish. And I think that's what the Psalms talk about, the nature, being able to praise God. And I think it's, our focus is so much on humans, and of course humans are important, but we are so connected. And I think sometimes, because we buy our vegetables and things from the supermarket, we forget that the soil is really important, healthy soil. And how do you get healthy soil is the importance of not putting chemicals and nasty chemicals and rubbish and things into it, and building it up and allowing us then to have healthy vegetables and healthy fruit, and that can affect how we live as well. But I think just getting people outside and being still. There's a lady, an Indigenous lady called Miriam, I can't say her surname, who teaches about meditating, just walking very slowly in nature, just listening, using our senses, just being still. I think we're often so busy, we find it really hard to slow down, to notice, to appreciate, and again, we then kind of push, I guess we take nature for granted, or we might go for a walk at a pretty place, but we would avoid the places that are degraded and unpleasant. But as I said, the land that I've been looking after was very degraded. It had lots of rubbish and things put on it, but it's been cleared up and now it's flourishing and looking beautiful. So people can enjoy it, but as well as not just humans, but we've got kangaroos visiting and koalas and more bird life. And I think no human could dismiss the fact that that's something really special, just to be able to see God's creation flourishing.
And at the COSAC conference, you were planning to do some interactive arts-based activities in your presentation. Can you tell me more about this?
I realise it could be difficult because the time would be short, but I was thinking about bringing some natural products into the room, and we could perhaps do some drawings or perhaps write a poem. I would like the people to sit in a circle, not in rows, as often happens at conferences, and so that we could, maybe we could play some simple games that could be help people to relax, and just talk about. I probably could have. I would have shown it some slides, and I think it's really important to see, for people to understand the symbiotic relationship between everything out there. And I could have talked about native bees. We have over 500 different types of native bees in South Australia, and they're really, really important for pollination. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't have our tomatoes and many other plants. And therefore, if we try and have this perfect garden and we use we use chemicals that could destroy the bees or destroy the insects, then the birds wouldn't have what they need for feeding on. And so it's just really important, just a way of getting people to see how everything is so closely related and so important.
Well, thank you for your time. I can definitely hear how much you love the creation that God's created, and I look forward to discussing it with you further in the COSAC conference.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you, Sonia. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hi, my name is Sonia, and I'm part of the COSAC committee this year.
I don't think we need to hear Sonia introduce herself again, do we? Why don't we go to Sonia live? And why don't we bring Sally into the room as well? Hello, Sally. How are you? That was a lovely interview. Thank you. Now, we've got some questions coming in. And I'm going to hand over to Sonia now to carry on that conversation with you, Sally. Let me see if I can make myself scarce by stopping my video and leave you two to talk, and I'll feed the questions to Sonia. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Hi, Sally. It's nice to see you again. Hello. Yeah. We just had a question, and this was our first question. And he says, what I'm hearing, Sally, is music to my ears. For 500 years, the church has neglected the creation in its theology. So what is your vision for clergy education in this regard?
Oh, yeah, that's a huge, huge question. I think one of the problems is the education system, the tertiary education system, which is very much putting knowledge into our heads and not looking at us as whole people. God has created us to be whole people. And, when you look at the early church, or even you look at Celtic Christianity or indigenous ways of knowing, they're very much holistic, looking at the whole of us. And unfortunately, our tertiary education has been influenced by the Enlightenment. And so we have difficulty or working with the body and the feelings and the intuition and all those things. And but it's not, there are things happening, and particularly in the UK, where in tertiary education, and I mentioned this to Sonia the other day, where they are using poetry and drama and drawing in engineering, in medicine. Now, it's not a total course, but at least they're starting to recognize that with the whole body is really important. Now, I see another question there.
Yeah, but before I ask that, I just wanted you to share a bit more about what was happening in the UK, especially in regards to eco churches. I found that really interesting, and I thought you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, I love the idea of eco churches. It's part of A Rocha, and I'm one of the directors of A Rocha in Australia, and it's an incentive scheme and it's crossed the denomination. It started in the Anglican Church, but all different denominations now use it. So you start with a bronze, and there's 5 different areas that you can look at in your church, and it's worship and your sermons. You know, what are we teaching our congregations as regards the creation? Often it's dualistic. We're going up to heaven and we're not caring for the earth. And it's the same with, you know, again, I think the dualistic attitude, or right back from Plato, that there's some notion that the body is not so important, as the earth is not so important, and spiritual things are much more important. Anyway, the eco church is looking at how church congregations can change their attitude. But it's a very gentle way of doing it. You start with the bronze, and you tick off boxes, and you look at how what's happening inside your church, your electricity costs, your water. Is it possible to have solar panels? Is it possible to make your church more sustainable? I mean, often British churches are very cold, so they have to think about how they could insulate them better. Outside, in the graveyard or wherever, how could that be more friendly for people and animals and butterflies and all those things? My sister's church in Aldershot, they've taken up quite a bit of the car park, and put a garden in it, and I think maybe we'll grow some vegetables, and that's been very inspiring for the congregation. And then look at what's happening in the community. How can we join with other groups who are already interested in caring for the environment? And then also what we could do in our own lifestyles. So that's just a snapshot of what's happening. They have well over 2,000 churches, and even St. Paul's Cathedral has a gold award. So it's reached the top, obviously doing very well.
Yeah, that sounds very inspiring, and maybe one day we'll see it.
I'd love to see it here. Yeah.
Mark had a question. He said, "Hello, Sally. Right brain thinking and having fun is part of contemporary big town corporate life. Does that surprise you?"
No, I'm certainly more aware of that. But I think, for those of you who are interested, it's worth Googling Ian McGilchrist. He's actually a Christian neurologist from Scotland. And on YouTube, you can see the most amazing cartoons of his ideas. And he very much thinks that our right brain is actually really, really important. It's for relationships, for social interaction, for learning, and it's, we often say, oh, well, I'm right brain because I can paint, or oh, she's a right brain person. Well, in fact, he says we're all right brained, but because of our economic system, because of our educational systems, we've encouraged the left brain to be more dominant, and as a result, the right brain gets neglected and forgotten about. So we need a balance of both. In fact, he says the left brain should be serving the right brain. Fantastic person to Google and learn from.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, the left brain is to serve the right brain. I've never thought of that before. Alan says, left brain, right brain. As an addictions doctor, can I make a plea for the limbic system, the center for emotions, pleasure, and then plea for integration rather than dominance of one part? Do you
Absolutely.
have? Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yes, the limbic is very, very important, and we need to be in our education or whatever we're doing, make sure that our emotions are playing a very important part. And we know too that our emotions come from our childhood, and so I think often our interest in creation has happened as children. we've played outside, we've done all kinds of fun things outside, and sadly, as we grow up and go to church, sometimes I think that playfulness, that love of nature, that being in God's creation gets forgotten about or pushed to one side. But I would love to see, well, certainly the workshops that I would like to run, I would like to see people think about, what did I do when I was a child? How did I enjoy being outside? No more questions yet.
Yes, no more questions. I think my last question would be, like, what's one thing that Christians can do just to start, like, looking into creation more and fostering that desire to care for God's creation?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think some people talk about having an ecological conversion experience. And certainly for me, that was the case. I was doing some weeding, pulling out horrible grasses that shouldn't be here in Australia. And I just got distracted by the question. So yeah, I think, and it was when I was pulling out these great big weeds, underneath was this beautiful little indigenous plant. And I felt that's what God was saying, that we have invaded, not looked after his creation. Yet he hasn't given up on it, but we have a place to speak out and speak for the justice of his creation, which is often being hidden and isn't being heard. But I think it's just recognizing our interconnectedness with nature in the first place, that, you know, we need the sunshine, we need water, we need healthy food. And if we didn't have those things, we wouldn't survive. And, you know, just being really grateful to God for those things, but also being aware of what we're doing to our foods, the chemicals we're putting in them, the type of water we're drinking. Are we drinking bottled water? Where does that come from? You know, is that healthy? Is it good for the planet? So I think but also to be aware of how our wealthy lifestyles in Australia, how it's affecting particularly the developing world, who are suffering the most, particularly from climate change. And we need to think about, well, how can we support them, not just giving aid, but look at our lifestyle so that climate change won't have the huge effect it is having on them.
Thank you. And last comment from Alan. It's not really a question, but you can reply back to it. So, at a different level, gardeners' multiple intelligences suggest dimensions other than literacy and numeracy. So there's kinesthetics, musicality, social skills, etc. Would you like to reply to that?
So what exactly is the question?
There's no question, but he's just making a comment, but you can respond to it if you like.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've quite grasped it, but yeah, I think there's many ways that we can learn. And yeah, unfortunately, okay, is there a question? Different level of guardians. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, gardener is, yeah, I think my children went to the Montessori school, and I think they've done very well with their education system. And yeah, it would be great to see that type of education move through into the tertiary education system.
Sorry, what was the Montessori school?
What's a Montessori school?
Yeah.
Montessori, she was she a teacher, a psychologist, Italian, and she devised someone's asking about the drums. She devised this very creative way of learning. So it's so when the children are doing a project, when they're learning maths, they might go outside and design the garden bed and do their maths and measurements, and then you know, geography, it could be looking at plants and global things, but everything's very integrated. And it's not just, right, we're going to learn maths today, we're going to learn French today. And the children have a lot of empowerment. They're really encouraged. If they do a lot of projects and they choose the subject of their interest, and I think it's a great way to learn. Now, someone's asking about the drums. Yeah,
you have to talk about the drums now. So do you play, or why are they there? Why do you have so many?
Why do I have so many? Yes. Yes, I've done some drumming courses, and so to run them, it's difficult. Where I actually went to the Montessori school to run a course with them, and they didn't have them, so I took some with me. And then I actually did some drumming with people with mental and physical disability. That's very challenging, but they didn't have any drums, so I used to take my drums along and we'd play them together. So yeah, we needed a few drums rather than just one, so they could interact too.
How did you get into that, or you just found it?
Yeah, good question. I love the sound of African drumming. It's very, there's a course called Drumbeat. It started in Western Australia, and they run, and I've done their course, so they run drum courses in prisons with young people with problems, and it's all about working together, learning from each other, having fun. There's a whole series of activities that you can go through to encourage people to open up and share. But it's all about accepting one another, no judgments, and learning from each other, and rhythm, working together. That's how I got into drums.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. And I think we're out of questions, and Chris is back on. So Chris.
Okay, well, that was great. Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you very much, Sonia. Now,
pleasure.
Sally, I don't know if one or two or even more of the people that have been watching would like to keep chatting a little bit. So I've put a link on YouTube for this Zoom session. We'll finish the YouTube session, but we'll stay here on Zoom. And if anybody does join us by clicking that link, they'll be able to interact face to face, if you like, but perhaps no one will join us. So I'm going to finish streaming to YouTube and say goodbye to anybody who's watching on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, though, before I say goodbye, let me say, if you haven't signed up for COSAC, please do. We have lots and lots of fascinating things to come. And although these pre-COSAC nights have been free, if you want to participate in COSAC, you will have to sign up, register and pay your dues. Of course, if you can't afford to pay your dues, register anyway and write me an email. Just ask for an invoice, write me an email, and we'll sort out the invoice as appropriate. So I'm now going to stop the live stream, and we'll see if anybody joins us on chat. Thanks very much for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.